Chapter 7 is the first chapter that goes over our chemistry unit. So first we're going to talk about classifying matter. So matter can be classified into two different categories. So either a pure substance or a mixture. So a pure substance always has the exact same composition. It's always going to have the same properties. So there's two different types of pure substances. It can either be an element or a compound. So an element cannot be broken down into smaller substances. It's only going to contain one type of atom. And these elements can be found on the periodic table. So on the second page here we have the periodic table. Each of these labels represents an element, and that can be considered a pure substance. Okay, so like nitrogen, oxygen, aluminum, nickel, sodium, lithium, hydrogen, these are all examples of elements. Compounds, on the other hand, are made of two or more elements joined in a fixed proportion. Okay, so they're going to be chemically combined, but they're always going to have the exact same composition. So CO2 is carbon dioxide, H2O is water. These are pure substances. Okay, so all H2O molecules together, combined together, that would be a pure substance. Okay. Mixtures, however, are compositions that are not fixed. They're not going to be chemically combined. They're just kind of inhabiting the same area. So examples of mixtures are things like salsa, sand, Chex Mix. Actually, the air that we breathe is a mixture. Okay, and it's because it has different components to it that are mixed together that aren't necessarily chemically combined. Okay, so like salsa, we have the different parts, like you might have onion, tomato, jalapenos in your salsa. Sand, if you look at sand, you can see the different particles that make up the sand. That's all not just uniform. Same thing with Chex Mix. Our air that we breathe has like oxygen, it has carbon dioxide, it has carbon monoxide, it has nitrogen. All of that is in the air. They're not chemically combined, but they are a mixture. Okay, so there's two different types of mixture. There's heterogeneous and there's homogeneous. So a heterogeneous mixture, hetero means different. Okay, so the parts are noticeably different. So things like our salsa, our Chex Mix, even our sand, they're noticeably different. If we look at salsa, we could see the different parts, the different components that make up that mixture. Same thing with Chex Mix. We can see the different things that make up the Chex Mix. So suspensions are heterogeneous mixtures that separate into layers over time. So if we were to take sand and put it into water and shake it up in a jar, the sand would kind of like dissipate into the water and it would make the water really murky. But if we were to leave it set for a while, eventually the sand is going to settle out. So that is a heterogeneous mixture that's known as a suspension. The other type of mixture is homogeneous. So homo means same. And so substances are evenly distributed and difficult to distinguish from each other. So for example, air. We can't distinguish between the nitrogen, the carbon dioxide, and the oxygen. It all just looks like one substance. Okay. And whenever things are mixed into water and we have a homogeneous mixture, these are known as solutions. So things like Kool-Aid, tap water, ocean water, like salt water, these particles aren't going to settle out. They like dissolve in the water. And so they can't be filtered, and light actually passes through it. So it's going to be transparent. So remember we talked about like opaque, transparent, and translucent whenever we talked about light. So transparent means that light passes through it fairly easily. Okay, so if we had a glass of tap water has a bunch of different minerals and things that are added to it. And so we can't really distinguish those because they're all dissolved in the water. Same thing with like salt water. Okay, light can pass through that salt water, but the salt is never going to just settle out in the salt water. Okay, a colloid is a little bit different. So this is going to have intermediate sized particles, whereas in a solution the particles are very, very small. So these intermediate sized particles in a colloid, they're basically going to be kind of like suspended in it, in the whatever it's mixed with, but it's not going to settle out. So the particles don't settle. It can't be filtered. So very similar to solutions, but it's going to scatter the light. So it's going to be translucent. So it's not going to be as clear. So it's kind of like through frosted glass, remember, is like an example of translucent, light through translucent. So that's the same with a colloid. So milk is actually a colloid along with fog. So we can't see clearly, light clearly through fog, and that is because it's a colloid. The water particles are medium-sized particles suspended in the air, and they create this colloid.